Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is going to be a little IEM roundup talking about several IEMs. I do have the new Vulkan on the table that you guys know has been in the Wallhack tier list for an extremely long time. Going back to the new Vulkan and testing this because it is very similar to the Seekreal Dawn Pro. It is really an impressive IEM and one of the best gaming IEMs that money can buy. A really nice neutral tuning that does have a little bit of a bass boost, but one that sounds very resolving, one that sounds very good in terms of detail retrieval in game when too many things are going on. Some of the best separation in IEM, which is again going to be very similar in transitioning to the Seekreal Dawn Pro in terms of that holographic imaging, which is exceptionally good and what we want to see in a Wallhack tiered IEM. I do want to note that I have tested the Bose QC20. I know a lot of people have kind of been interested in these because there are some pros that use these. The Bose QC20 have some of the worst tuning for the money that I have ever heard. The imaging is just okay. Depth perception is just okay. You do get a sense of height and depth, but overall separation is quite poor. I would not recommend these to anybody who is looking for a solid competitive gaming IEM, especially not at this price point. I think these actually fall behind Apple earbuds, and we're going to put these to the side. In terms of the other things on the table that I have tested and unfortunately just haven't worked for one reason or the other, I do want to talk first about the Letshore Galileos. These are a beautiful set for music listening purposes, but music listening does not always transition into gaming utilization. And for gaming, these have some of the worst separation that I have heard in an IEM. And to illustrate, with two guys shooting to my right, I was unable to hear absolutely anything else happening. And right here, when I begin to pop a shield cell, I actually did not hear somebody moving above me on the staircase until I was done popping the cell. One of the problems with the Galileo is when you are doing anything in game, it is just too hard to hear anything else that is happening around you. The tuning isn't necessarily bad, but everything is shouty from this driver configuration or the quality of the drivers. I'm not quite sure what is causing the shoutiness. It's not something that I get in music, but in gaming, if I do anything either in Valorant or Apex, if I'm shooting a Vandal or there are grenades going off, even if I'm shooting a 301, which isn't the bassiest sound of a gun in an FPS, I just can't hear anything that's happening around me. And for that reason, I would not be able to recommend the Letshore Galileo for gaming. Again, for music, I would definitely shoot you guys over to look at some reviews because these are quite good with a nice, pretty neutral sounding IEM for music listening purposes with pretty well textured bass. Something that sounds pretty good for a lot of tracks, and vocals kind of come to the forefront and sound really nice on the Galileos. The C Audio Rinko is a interesting driver configuration with one dynamic driver, one planar driver. This set is only $100, and I think this is going to be something that will be for a specific listener, somebody who wants a little bit more huskiness, a little bit more darkness in their music. This has a elevated bass, and it really does come through. But something that for gaming-related purposes didn't work for me. There's just too much of that shroudiness of deepness that makes everything sound a little bit off. For gaming, the imaging actually was pretty good, pretty solid. Depth perception was pretty solid as well. Where these kind of failed is for separation. Again, with that elevation in the lower end, when you're doing something like popping a bat, shooting a Vandal, grenades going off in CSGO, ultimates going off in Apex, etc., things like that, it's just too hard to hear anything else going on around you, and you lose that detail retrieval. So I would not be able to recommend the C Audio Rinko. For the QKZ HBB Con, it is a similar issue. The imaging is quite good. Depth perception is quite good. Verticality on these is actually better on the Rinko, which I forgot to mention. The verticality on the Rinko, when things were happening above me or below me, it actually sounded as though it was on the same level as me, which is also another poor feature of the IEM for gaming-related purposes. We need to be able to hear where somebody is above us, where somebody is below us, and I lost that on the C Audio Rinko. The HBB Con is actually better for verticality, but it also does have that kind of shroudiness in deepness and darkness and bass. So when there are things happening around you, like footsteps on metal or Pathfinder kind of crinkling his arm or his player model. You get that kind of like metallic-y sound, or with Octane. You lose that on the HBB Con or QKZ HBB Con for gaming-related purposes, and there's just too much detail retrieval that is lost with these. And again, the separation, the same thing when batteries. When you're popping a battery, you have the storm behind you, etc. It's just too hard to pick up a lot that you would normally be able to hear. So we're going to put those to the side as well. The SimGod EA500 has some of the best tuning out of the things on the table for music listening purposes. A really great IEM for music, and one that is exceptionally comfortable. Build quality is great for, I think it's $75 or $80, and it does have a interchangeable nozzle. So you do get a different tuning with the nozzles in the box. The default nozzle that comes on the IEM is almost unusable for me in gaming. The second nozzle is not bad. One thing I noticed, though, on the SimGod EA500 is that when you are targeting somebody with your ears at a distance, if they're at height or they're below you, you lose a little bit of the sense of accuracy on where exactly they are. The overall imaging is not bad. These definitely are usable in game. I would just say, though, that the separation, likewise, with only one dynamic driver, everything becomes a little bit too shouty when there are a lot of bassy things going on or a lot of mid-bass, and it just covers up too much again. So I would not be able to recommend the EA500 for gaming-related purposes. For music and multi-use purposes, I would definitely recommend these out of everything else that we have on the left side. Now, the Dunu Vulkan and the Seekreal Dawn Pro. The Dunu Vulkan is one hell of a gaming IEM, arguably better than the Orchestra Lite. For certain people, I could see them either going for the Orchestra Lite or the Zen's Top, or the Dunu Vulkan or the Seekreal Dawn Pro. The Dunu Vulkan with 4 balanced armatures, 2 dynamic drivers. The separation is just so exceptionally good. Depth perception is so precise. You really get a sense of how good the HD 560s can be, but in an IEM format with a better and more fun tuning than something like the Sennheiser HD 560s. So an exceptional showcase of what IEMs can do. Verticality is absolutely pinpoint precise. When grenades are going off, ultimates are going off, you're getting third, fourth partied. You really do pick up a lot of that detail that is happening around you in those intense moments. And the game just feels overall and sounds overall really nice. It's got a nice neutral tuning with a little bit of a bass boost. It's very balanced, so the bass isn't overcoming the mids or the upper region, and the mid bass likewise is not going to be covering up the mid, so you're getting a lot of that detail retrieval. The soundstage is pretty wide and the imaging is pretty damn holographic, and that's what we want to see in a gaming IEM. You want to feel as though you are in the space and everything that is happening around you is almost more of like a virtual reality type feel. If something's behind you, you want to hear that with emphasis. The urgency or emergence on the Dunu Vulkan is exceptionally good, so you really get a idea of what to focus on around you first. If you ever feel like on the QC20, you don't really know what is more important to look at, you really hear with the Dunu Vulkan what you need to look at and when, and the depth perception is exceptionally good. So if you hear something at a distance, the directionality is so good at depth that you kind of have your crosshair flick to that sound cue with absolute precision. The Seekreal Dawn Pro is a very similar experience, but I would say one that is a little bit more open feeling than the Dunu Vulkan. So where you get a little bit more urgence or emergence in the audio cues around you on the Dunu Vulkan. You still get that with the Dawn Pro, but it's a little bit more open. The Dawn Pro is exceptional for separation. For separation, I have to give these about an 85. There are so many things that can go on in a control match or in an actual game of Apex, and you're still picking up things around you. They're just exceptionally good for that purpose. For verticality, I do give the Dunu Vulkan the edge a little bit, one tick above the Dawn Pro. And then just overall imaging, they're both so good. I could see somebody picking the Dunu Vulkan over the Dawn Pro, and I can see somebody picking the Dawn Pro over the Dunu Vulkan. I could see somebody going for these over the Orchestra Lite. Just all exceptionally good IEMs. The Dawn Pro having a very holographic imaging, a very wide soundstage, one that feels open and exceptionally good, but not too open where you're losing the emphasis on things that are going on around you. Depth perception is great. The sense of verticality and depth is great. An IEM that I would say, if I was to give the Dunu Vulkan an overall rating for all of those things that we're talking about, I would probably score it about an 85. The Dawn Pro, I would score like an 84 or an 84.5. And to illustrate the importance of emphasis and separation, as I am engaging in this 1v1 with my Prowler, I'm still able to hear that there are multiple people in the building, so I know how quickly I need to be prepared. And it helps you know how to do damage while avoiding damage, not putting yourself in a position that exposes you to a second or third player. Especially with this play here, again, I am getting a great sense of directionality from height, and I'm getting the ability to separate and localize these people in the building so that I know it's safe to get off a heal. I know my timing of when I need to push, and the sense of urgence on how quickly I need to get in to re-engage, and again, position myself in a way to not take damage. The bass on certain soundtracks is more textured, in my opinion, than the Dunu Vulkan. I feel that with certain tracks, I've been playing a lot of Crab Champions. The soundtrack is absolutely fire in Crab Champions. The Dawn Pro is just a lot nicer, in my opinion, to listen to. You get more engaged with that planar bass for certain soundtracks compared to the Dunu Vulkan. So if that's something that you would like, a little bit more of a V-shaped sound compared to the U-shaped sound of the Dunu Vulkan. So mids can be a little bit more recessed than compared to the Dunu Vulkan. But that planar bass is pretty damn nice on the Seekreal Dawn Pros for a lot of those soundtracks and engaging things in games. So two exceptionally good IEMs. I could see somebody going, again, the other one direction or the other. Both of these are going to be on the Wallhack tier list. They really did a nice job with the Seekreal Dawn Pro, and as you guys know, the Dunu Vulkan has been and will continue to be a solid option for a competitive gaming IEM. That is it for this one, guys. Just a lot of IEMs that did not work for one reason or the other, and then one IEM that will be making a solid showing on the Wallhack tier list for $100 less than the Dunu Vulkan. I hope it helped. If it did, please leave a sub to the channel. I'll see you guys in the next review. Peace.